Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another awesome episode of the Life in a Show podcast, where we help people make more, work less, and live better lives. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the podcast, we also have Polish Peter as my co-host. What's up, dude?
Hey, man, it's good to be back. Good to be on this episode. I mean, we have, I think, one of the most controversial and I think powerful topics that we're going to talk about today on this particular episode. And not a lot of people talk about it, but I think it's important to talk about this because in my coaching, I come across it. You know what I mean?
Right. And what Peter's referring to, and this is, by the way, this is very atypical for the Life in Our Show. And I want to give that caveat, but like Peter said, I think it's really important to kind of shed a light on this. And we're going to talk about the subject of pornography, particularly from a male's standpoint, because this is something that, at least as of today, this is something that affects men directly more than women. Women are obviously affected as well, but this is mostly from the perspective of a man. And we're going to talk about it, like, what are the draws to this? How do we deal with this? How do we cope with it? How do we understand it? How do we kind of really process this? And kind of like make sure, and eliminate this as a problem, if it is a problem in our lives, and how to self-identify if this is a problem. And like we talk about so many different angles, man. Like it's a really good conversation.
Yeah, and I would ask you, if you're listening to this episode, to set your own expectations or preconceived notions about this particular topic, because I think it will open up a way for you to listen to this episode in a way that whether you are dealing with it or you have someone in your life who deals with it, because actually at the end of the conversation, I asked, how would you approach this if you are someone who has someone in your life who deals with this? Yeah. And he gave a really good answer to be able to go and resolve it. Because think about this, your own personal self-worth, your relationships, whether you're married or you're dating or whatever it might be, will get affected and probably are getting affected. So if that's the case, I think it will be a good episode for you to listen to, whether it's, from, your own space, and whether it's be useful for you, or even if it's an addiction to something else. I think that conversation is useful for other types of things, So,
and this is a great conversation, a topic that I think is swept under the rug and ignored and hidden. And so we're bringing it to light right now. And here's our conversation with Matthew Sinkovitz. Matt, what's up, man? Welcome to Life in Our Show.
Jason, it's good to be here, brother. Thank you so much.
It's been a while. Yeah, and so you already met Polish Peter here, man. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. I didn't prepare you for this.
Yes, I did. We got to connect and found that we've got some similar heritage. So.
Oh man, okay, gotcha. I won't hold that against you. That's okay.
Thanks.
Well, listen, man, we're gonna talk about a kind of a serious subject today, and it's one that actually is very off the beaten path for Life in Air. Yet at the same time, I think it's and we even had some discussion like, hey, is this appropriate? Is this valuable? And the answer was, yeah, it is valuable, because
it's important to talk about. I think.
What's that?
It's important to talk about.
It is important to talk about, and I think people don't want to talk about it. And so we're going to talk about pornography, really, and how this can affect somebody, and what are some of the things like to like just open this dialogue about this topic. And so Matt, like what is it like? How did you get in? Because you are on a I don't know if I'd call it a mission. Maybe you would call it a mission. But this is something that you are passionate about, and you kind of talk about. What is it that drew you to this and makes you want to share and help other people with this?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I am very passionate about this work, and this work is very close to my heart because it's been a huge part of my path. Porn is something that I've dealt with since my teens, like most men, and so I struggled with pornography a lot throughout my life. And as I grew as an adult and grew and began to grow professionally and began to really see that coaching, personal development, spiritual development was a field that I was very much called to. My work, all the work that I had done and been doing and continue to do around pornography kind of coalesced and came together with my personal and spiritual development pursuits professionally, and it just came together. So this is my work because this is my path, and I very much I'm living this work.
And so what what effect has this had on your life? Like, if you were to look back, and what are the effects you see in other people's lives as a result of this? Like, why is this important?
Man, that's like a really big question. I would say that it is impact, but the thing is, it's like it's kind of a tricky question because it's like, some of the common things that a lot of guys see, or a lot of common themes around pornography or pornography addiction, are like shame, self-confidence issues, issues around relationship, uh, body image addiction in general. So it's kind of like, which came first? Did Was shame and depression and self-confidence issues already there, and then they led to porn, or was porn there and they led to the shame and the self-confidence and depression and body image and relationship issues? So those would be a couple things right off the top of my head. So I don't know if like I was predisposed to addiction early in life, or depression, which is something that I've dealt with a lot, or um, self-confidence issues. I don't know if that was present first and then porn kind of showed up. And there's like this self-perpetuating loop that's often at play. But some of the big themes and some of the big impacts, if we were just to really look at, like, porn is the problem and here's the reason why, it's impacts in relationship in huge ways, impacts in self-image, self-esteem, self-confidence, big implications around shame. Um, and I think in many ways that shows up in how we're showing up in the world in general, in our work lives, in our relationships, in our sense of purpose, and what we're here to do in the world. Those are some big ones. Not to mention all the ways that the industry has a very dark quality to it, and I think we're feeding into a potentially very dark industry in many ways. That's another big impact.
Man, well, like, so I'm looking up stats as you're talking here, and on addictionhelp.com, it says that approximately 69% of American men and 40% of American women view online porn each year. Um,
Wow.
Pornhub alone reported more than 2 billion visits in a single month in 2023.
Yeah,
So clearly this is widespread, you know,
yeah.
and so what is it like what is it about it that clearly makes it so attractive to people, or appealing? Um, like, what do you feel like is just draws people to this?
Sex,
Yeah. Like sex
sex.
sells, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
I mean, it's like it is. I mean, that and food, are like two of the, and oftentimes we see correlations between food and sex. I know, like, that's been a big theme for me. Um, but yeah, man, like, sex is like primary driver to our human existence and human evolution. And and so I think pornography has really hijacked our sexuality and our sex drive, and it's really being used against us in many ways. So I think we have a very, like, sexuality is an instinctual part of us all, and it's been hijacked, man. So that's what's appealing about it. It's
right.
how we all got here.
Well, and it just struck me too. People joke half jokingly use this term food porn, right?
Right,
Like, it's like, what? This is like, it's kind
right.
of like, yeah, it's kind of, they are, I can see that, man. And so, gosh, and so with something being so prevalent, um, I agree with you, man. There's so many things that I think, and by the way, I could be wrong in this, and please correct me if I misspeak, but like, I'm thinking like, it distorts what this relationship is supposed to be and intimacy is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Like you said, dude, Peter, I don't know if you ever knew this. Not a lot of people know this. I dated a girl, gosh, 20 years ago.
You dated a girl?
That's not the scary part. That's not, dude, she actually got into porn. After we had broken up, I found out a couple years later, I had a friend um, who knew her, and he said, "Hey, did you know that so and so is doing porn?" I was like, "What?" And I met this girl's parents. I met this girl's. She had a kid, and
Mm.
dude, that was the weirdest thing for me, because like, this again, this is a long time ago, but like it just made it so real, like that these are actual real people. This is someone's daughter. This is
Mm.
someone's son. Like, and dude, it was the most bizarre experience. I don't even know if you ever knew that, man. Like it was super weird,
That
super
is
super
weird.
weird.
That is crazy. Yes.
Wojo. So listen, one of the things that I heard from you as you were sharing, Matt, is, and I think Wojo kind of brought it up. I think this is an important aspect to it. It distorts the reality, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the big part, I think, because, um, there was this, I don't know, elaborate on that about distorting the reality, because I think people don't make that connection.
Yeah. Well, it does distort reality, and it I think affects the lens in which we view the world and view others and view women. It impacts the way, I think it sets an unrealistic expectation and standard of women, and also in our sexual relationships. Like I was on another podcast. I think it was at the end of last week, and it was coming from the female perspective, and they were talking about you know the way women, or the host, it is a podcast for women. It's like a dating podcast, and the host, she was talking about how she dated a man who was addicted to pornography earlier in her life, and it really showed up in the bedroom, and he was expecting her to do all this really kind of unusual, you might say, or unnatural to her, or unrealistic sexual stuff, and she felt like it came directly from pornography. So I think that's one of the big things. I know for me personally, um, the times that I've been using pornography heavily, it kind of affects the filter or the lens in which I see and engage with the world and women. I sexualize women much more often, and I know that definitely shows up in the bedroom, and with our standards. And I think a big one there is, I'm 40, so I was kind of probably one of the last generations that I grew up without the internet in the home, and I was also there like in high school whenever the internet came into the home, and it was like this big deal. So I experienced what life was like without the internet and without these phones in our pockets. But I think another big one is kids are coming up now today, and I think I heard recently kids are like, for an average, kids are seeing pornography like age 9 or 10 in many cases,
Wow.
because it's on our phones, so kids are being exposed to it much earlier. And what I've been hearing is that it's impacting kids, young men's expectations of sex and what sex is from a very early age. And also then that impacts the women, because they feel the expectation to perform in these ways. So it impacts our lens and our perception of the world and others, I think, significantly.
So listen, so follow up to question to that. So if that is impacting the relationship and how you see the opposite sex and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that in some shape or form, you get into the relationships, or whether it's marriage or dating or whatever it might be, that over a period of time, it literally negatively can affect a relationship, not just from the perspective that, let's say the person goes back to porn and they watch porn and all that kind of stuff, but interacting in that relationship, right?
Oh,
Having
man.
conversations with the person, and how you show up in that relationship, and how your expectations and things like that will
Yeah.
negatively impact that relationship, that can ultimately end in, ending, and the relationship will end.
Yeah, that's huge, man. So, you might say, okay, there's a direct correlation, because if a man's watching porn a lot, it's going to affect his expectations and his standards sexually, right? Or in the bedroom. That might distort that. And I've definitely heard a lot of instances of that. But another one, in specifically as it relates to pornography in the realm of sex addiction, there's this conversation of what's called intimacy avoidance. And what I've begun to see in my own journey, and the men that I've worked with, is that a lot of times guys, they justify the use of porn, and they say, hey, you know what? I've got a strong sex drive. It's a lot stronger than my wife's. And so I use porn to kind of take the edge off and satisfy myself in the ways that my wife can't. And I've come to recognize that that's not fully true. Oftentimes we think it's a sexual need that we're attempting to meet by going to porn, but very often there are underlying needs and emotions that we're attempting to meet or address by going to porn. So a lot of times, there's like this term in addiction. It's called HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? So oftentimes when we're going to porn or food or the screen or a drug of choice, there's something else that's present underneath the surface. And what I found is that not only can porn affect the way a man is engaging in the relationship, but he might be using porn to withdraw from the relationship, to distract from the relationship. Where he's going to porn, he's placing his attention and his focus on pornography. He is directing all his sexual energy at pornography, and he's checked out of the relationship, and he's not present in the relationship because he's distracted and somewhere else. So a lot of times it drives a big wedge between couples because the guy is wasting all of his sexual energy over here, and it's not showing up in the relationship.
Man, I could see that. And when I think of all the effects that pornography can have, like, there's a lot of things to be cautious of. And, before we started recording, though, we also said, like, hey, we're not here to cast judgment on anybody that is addicted to porn, or make them feel guilty in any way, or not even to demonize pornography, but rather kind of just help bring awareness around it so that people can kind of make better decisions and maybe even take a self-assessment if this is something they have a problem with. Let's talk about that, man. What does that look like?
Yeah, man. So I'm not the guy that, there are certain camps that they do demonize pornography as, in general. And that's just not my voice, and that's not what I'm here to do. I do think that inherently it has the potential to be a very dark industry, and there are a lot of dark aspects of it. But I'm not here to say that everybody that watches porn is a bad person or is doing bad things. Right? Some camps might call it be blatant and call it a sin. It's like, so I don't think it's necessarily and inherently wrong, or someone is necessarily or inherently bad for doing it. But I do know that it definitely has the potential to be problematic. So I'm here not to tell you whether or not porn is right or wrong or bad or good for you, but I'm here to help the man that's able to self-identify and be like, hey, I've got an unhealthy relationship with this thing, and it's creating turmoil in my life. Just like, I can drink a couple beers at a party and then not drink for another month, and I'm cool, right? But some people drink one beer and it's a downward spiral of destruction and chaos, and who knows what that could turn into, right? So for some people, pornography, they may be able to just enjoy it occasionally, or maybe enjoy it in their relationship once in a while. I've talked to some guys who are like, yeah, I might watch porn once a month, but it's not really my thing. It never has been. But for some guys like me, it is our thing, and it's a drug. It's a drug of choice, and it can be very problematic. And just like we have the addiction to the phone, or just like some people have addiction to cigarettes or the screen or alcohol, we can develop addictive qualities for it. And especially, it's very tricky because, like, if an alcoholic, for instance, was on their sobriety path, they would likely not have alcohol in the house. Like, that would be a pretty standard thing. But guys that struggle with porn, we've got our bottle of whiskey in our back pocket at all times. So it's not just a porn thing. We're also dealing with this dopamine addiction, this screen addiction, and porn kind of gets interwoven in there. So it's very tricky. So I feel like we kind of want to. I might have gone off track a little bit there.
No, this is great, dude. Yeah, and like, yeah, like, so.
Question?
Yeah, so like, so how does somebody kind of like, well, you're really bringing up a great point of like,
yes, thank you. Yeah. So what this requires, I have found, is that it requires radical honesty, and a man really assessing for himself, is this problematic? Am I using porn to check out? Am I using porn daily and I'm not engaging with my wife sexually, or it's affecting the lens in which I'm seeing in, the world through, or I'm using it at work, or I'm driving around looking at it, which is, all these things are very common. So I'm not here to really tell you whether or not, but I am here to help a man assess for himself whether or not it's problematic. And also I'm here for the man who's like, yep, I'm clear that it's a problem for me. So I have a couple ways that I can kind of help a man screen himself, and maybe we could talk about those a little bit here today. How do I determine for myself that pornography may be an issue, and maybe I get to take a closer look at it?
Man, that'd be great. Like, tell us about that.
Cool. So again, all these I'll give 3 ideas here, and what I will say is they require radical honesty, right? Because pornography, like many things, it's like our binky, it's like our drug, and a lot of times we might not want to give it up. So I think we get to be really honest with ourselves in this conversation and kind of making the determination: is this a problem for me? One, very simply, is, have you tried to quit in the past, or told yourself, hey, you know what? I've been watching too much porn. I think this is unhealthy for me. I'm going to quit. And you've told yourself you're going to quit, and you tried to quit 100 times probably, but you continue to return to the same habits and behaviors. That's a really clear one. If there's a general sense of powerlessness or loss of control in your relationship with it, you've told yourself it's unhealthy, you recognize it's destructive in some way, but you keep going back to it. That would be one way for somebody to indicate. Number 2.
So hold on, before you go into number 2, I want to ask you something, because you said, like, there's a powerlessness and you go back to it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a coach. I've had conversations about porn. I've conversations about alcohol. I have conversations about all kinds of different kind of addictive kind of ways that you're doing it. And I think there is for a lot of times what ends up happening is that I got it covered, right? It's
Right.
not a problem. It's more like this denial kind of a thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
How do you distinguish it? How you come to you as a person? How you actually say, yeah, you know what? I don't have a control, because I think there is it's almost like, I don't know if I'm saying correct, like they're lying to yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
How you distinguish that?
Well, a lot of times we recognize that through hitting our own personal rock bottom. Maybe we get caught at work, right? Or maybe a wife or a partner catches us, or our kid walks in on us, right? Or, I've got one client right now who spent a bunch of money online sexting with the sex worker, right? And his wife found the credit card bill. So sometimes we gotta get punched in the face and hit some sort of rock bottom. Maybe we get in some sort of legal trouble around it. So in our work, I study the work of George Collins, who's a therapist, and we incorporate his work into our curriculum. And he talks about, we can choose to either have a high bottom or a low bottom. A low bottom might look like some of those scenarios I just explained there. It's there's legal trouble, like there's a consequence in my life, like the rubbers met the road. I thought, but that's the problem with addiction. Addiction is like it's a disease of the mind. There's delusion. Sometimes we can't even see that we can't stop. It's like we can lie to ourselves. So that's where it's in the 12-step recovery, they call it cunning. It's cunning and baffling, because sometimes we can't even see it, Yep. But some guys have to hit a low bottom, like I just explained. But some guys might just be able to recognize, like, man, like I've been up watching porn till 5 a.m. every night for the past week, and it's draining me at work, and I'm tired of feeling depressed. I'm tired of the shame that comes along with it. I'm tired of watching porn every night. Meanwhile, I haven't been in a relationship for 2 or 3 years. Now, that might just be a point of realization that a man might come to and be like, and I've told myself 100 times I was going to quit, but I cannot stop. And I've made a resolution 100 times, and I said, this is it. And I've done this and done that, but I keep returning to it there. So that could be a high bottom where we just recognize through, again, I've prefaced this all by saying this requires radical honesty, self-honesty,
Right.
We just maybe we can recognize, like, wow, like I thought I could stop this, but obviously I can't, because I just see evidence for it like throughout my life.
That explains it. Got it. Thank you. What's number two?
Okay.
What's the second one?
That's a good question. That's good. That's good for clarification. Number two, I kind of spoke to this in my first point, is we get to just take a look at like the energy and the emotions around it. Again, this requires radical self-honesty. So you might find that you've had a good day. You maybe you hit your workout, your meditation, you're feeling good about yourself and about life. Then you go and you use pornography, you masturbate, or whatever your ritual is around it. Like, how do you feel in and around it afterwards? Like, does the use of pornography, does it light you up? Does it make you feel better about yourself? Does it make you feel more whole, like a fuller, brighter, greater version of yourself? Or do you notice that your light is slightly diminished after use? Maybe you're more contractive. Maybe you've got more feelings of shame, embarrassment, right? Kind of present around it. Less energy, less inclination to want to connect with others. There's a loss of productivity at work. So the second piece, it's a little bit more nuanced. We get to look at, what is my energetic state in and around use and after use, and what is my emotional state in and around use? That's another big one. For me, I notice after I use pornography that that depression is more common, shame is more common. My energy levels are lower. I don't want to go out. I don't want to connect. I don't want to be engaging with other people. There's oftentimes a loss of productivity for me. So for me, it kind of dims my light, and I contract and I withdraw, and there's negative feelings and emotions around it. So we get to self-assess on that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
because of the emotions. Yeah, it's what's your response, how you feel
Yeah.
afterwards. I think that's a
Yeah.
big thing. All right.
What's the energetic or emotional impact? Okay.
Right.
So again, that
Gotcha.
requires honesty. And number three is pornography something that you have to hide in your life? I often love to ask guys, like, okay, how would you feel right now, guys, if you handed over your cell phone history or your browser history to your wife, to your kid, or to your pastor? Like, how would you feel about that? Is pornography something that you have to sneak around about? Are you sneaking around at work? Are you sneaking around at home? A lot of guys sneak off in the bathroom. Is it something that your wife or your kids walk in the phone and you got into the room and you got to put your phone down real quick, or hide it, right? Is there an energy of hiding or lying or sneaking around it? Anytime that there's something going on in our life where we have to hide or lie or cover our tracks around, it's an indication that it could potentially be an unhealthy aspect of our life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Got it. Dude, well, listen, I'm struggling to hear any good use or beneficial use of pornography. It feels like, and again, this is not coming from any kind of place of shame or guilt, or please don't take it that way, but like,
Right.
I'm searching for this and I really don't know. Like, to me, it almost feels like it feels like you're trading a short-term temptation, like right there in the moment, a super quick, like kind of fix
Yeah.
and you're exchanging that for a long-term sense of well-being. And
Yeah.
it feels like a bad trade to me, man.
It is. It's like eating junk food, man. I'm
Yeah,
really,
dude, that's a great
again,
analogy.
yeah, there's a lot of correlations between sex and food, or porn and food for me. But yeah, it's like momentarily it's good on the lips, but the way we feel afterwards, oftentimes all those feelings of shame and kind of self-confidence, I'm feeling bloated, I'm feeling disgusting, I don't like the way I look. It tastes good at the moment, absolutely. And again, that's kind of earlier in our conversation today. We talked about how I think our sexuality's been kind of hijacked in a way, right? That it's like it lures us in because it's tempting and it's satisfying and it feels good in the moment, but there's a big weight or a big tax on the back end. And again, maybe some people can use it for maybe they use it in the bedroom as a couple, or maybe they've explored their sexuality with it or something like that, and they've had some positive benefits. and there are like conscious forms of pornography apparently out there as well, more where people are really more intimate and engaging and having real sex. But even still, man, for a guy that has a problem with porn, like some people, they'll be like, hey, I don't drink, they'll try and trade, they'll try and make trades. They'll like barter in their relationship. Like, I had a problem with alcohol. Liquor was a big problem for me, so I would just only drink on the weekends, or I would just drink beer, or I would just drink wine. But the truth is, if we have a problem with alcohol, we have a problem with alcohol. So for me, if I tried to just say, oh, I just use porn in my relationship, or I just use porn and I when I watch more conscious versions of it, it's still going to be problematic and it's still going to trend in unhealthy directions. So yeah, man, as far as I'm concerned, at least again, I speak for myself. Um, the tax on the back end is much greater than what we receive on the front end, man.
Yeah, man. That's kind of like what the more I think about it, I'm in alignment with that. So one question that I do have, and I'm not sure if any of us are qualified to talk about it. Maybe you are, Matt. And the one thing that you mentioned it earlier briefly was the man who says like, "Hey, my wife, you know, doesn't have the same sex drive as I do," and um, and there's this discrepancy there. Like, I guess that would probably be the discussion for like maybe who would be able to help someone with that? Would that be a couples therapist or something, or like how
Yeah.
do you address that? Because listen, so, then by the way, it could go the other way too. I'm not just trying to say it's just guys, but typically guys are the ones that have the higher sex drive. But not always, but like, and so any kind of thoughts on that, or do you not kind of get into that realm of
Well,
things?
I mean, there's a lot there. It's like I think that would come down to what's the quality of the relationship, and like, is the relationship salvageable? Is there real compatibility there?
Mm,
If there's not compatibility, maybe there's just not compatibility, and maybe you get to take a look at if it's the right relationship for you. But that is like a whole other conversation.
yeah,
But I've seen a lot of couples, and I am in the realm of, the potential for relationships to be revived and for intimacy to be stoked, and that magnetism and that polarity to be reinvigorated. And oftentimes, sexual attraction is a byproduct of intimacy that's being experienced. So if we're close, if we're connected, if we're experiencing emotional intimacy and emotional connection within the relationship, then sex follows, so I think we get to take an honest look at that, at really, like, is it the right relationship, because
yeah,
there may just be sexual incompatibility, or,
sure,
or
sure.
or incompatibility in general in the relationship.
Well, man, and I love what you said there too. Is like, sometimes guys can just feel like, hey, it's nighttime. I'm going to turn it on just like this. Meanwhile, they haven't connected with their spouse at all
Right,
during the day. They've been
right,
completely cold, distant. Like
right,
there's no support, no love along. Because it's like and I've heard this from women like, oh, he just touches me when he wants something. Like
right,
Yeah.
that's not the formula, guys. Like that's not how it
right.
works. And so there's a lot of things that contribute to that, but I just wanted to address that because I know some guys are thinking this like, well, you don't understand, da da da. Okay, but are you doing all like maybe it
Right,
is a compatibility issue number one, or maybe you're kind of not doing what you need to be doing too, and
right.
meeting your spouse where they need to be met.
Yeah.
Peter, you got something?
Yeah. So earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, I don't know if it was in the conversation or before the podcast that we started, that you can share one thing that would help someone who is in this position. Like,
Yeah.
now that I know that, we've talked about the three things, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, I'm the one who has,
Right.
go back to it. So what's the next step for me?
Yeah. The one thing I'd recommend for any man who maybe you're not like, yeah, that's definitely me, but maybe like through today's conversation, you've identified for yourself, like, yeah, maybe it is a problem, and maybe some dots are beginning to be connected for you.
Mhm.
The one thing I think every man should do, or a great first step, is to connect with the community. Is to connect with a community that is having this conversation, that is doing this work, because it is by joining a community that we begin to uh, First of all, see that others are on the same path. Like sex addiction there's such a stigma to it. And a lot of
Hmm.
times that stigma is self-imposed, and there's shame, and we feel weird, and we feel gross, and we feel like a pervert, and we feel like no one's as messed up as I am, you know? And what we find by getting into community of other men, typically who are having this conversation and dealing with the same thing, is that we're actually pretty normal. And there's a large community there's a large population of men who are dealing with the same things, and we can begin to normalize the conversation around this, and we begin to like have these conversations that we've maybe never had with anybody, with other men. And we've got this beautiful idea that we work with that was shared to me by my coach, and it says that shame dies when stories are told in safe places. Shame
Yeah.
dies when stories are told in safe places. So that's what we work to cultivate, and that's what we work to help men find, is a community that's safe, so he can come bring his darkest secrets, his darkest aspects of himself, bring them to the light, and then that we can begin to shift and transmute and change that shame that we've been carrying by ourselves for so long. So getting into a safe space to have the conversation with others who are on the path. And number two is we can begin to see, oh, there's others who are finding success and victory in this work. So I might feel hopeless, but I see others that have found recovery. So I know it's possible for me. And we can begin to receive of the wisdom of the community, of the group, and receive of the wisdom from others who are maybe further down the path from us.
Yeah, dude, I
Really cool.
love that. I mean, shame dies when you're in safe places. So that means there is no
Basically.
judgment, right?
Yeah.
And the community, I think it's a great outlet to be able to kind of speak about it, and that's when shame starts to dying, which I think is has the effect on that. Pornography is you have to go less to it, and I think it's a very impactful, positive effect of it.
Yep.
So I love that you shared that. So I got a follow up question too, on from the other side of things, because what popped into my head as you were talking about this, when I was a kid, my dad was an alcoholic. He was addicted to alcohol. Like I've seen him drink perfume out of the bottle, kind of a thing, right? And I remember one of the questions that I had back in my mind is, why can't you just stop? The kid was
Right.
asking, like, why can't you just stop, right? And there was a lot more to that. Since then I've learned a lot about alcoholism and things like that. But the question I have for you is this: if I'm a spouse in a relationship where, my husband, let's say, is dealing with this kind of a thing, right? Or I know someone in my life, I'm a girlfriend, and someone, the boyfriend is dealing with pornography and things like that. What would you say to that person, that girlfriend or the wife or someone, to help them help the other person in this journey? Like, what would you suggest to that particular person?
Yeah. It's a good question. That's a hard one. And yes, so often the question can be, well, why don't you just stop? Or why can't you just stop? And that creates a lot of problems, man, because yeah, a woman in a relationship might say, hey, you recognize and I recognize and we recognize that this is a problem. Just stop. But it's just not that easy. And that's the nature of addiction. And that's why Alcoholics Anonymous, exists. And that's why Sexaholics Anonymous exists. And
Mhm.
like that's why addiction is a thing, because if it were just that easy to stop, then it wouldn't be an addiction, but it's a real thing. Um, so I think and again, this comes down to, I think, the quality of the relationship as well. But in the best case scenario, you've got someone on the other side of the relationship who's doing their work, who's willing to do the work of growth, and they're on their journey of growth and evolution as well. And I say that because I think a couple things are important to keep in mind for this. One is oftentimes a woman feels, yeah, she asked the question, why can't you just stop? Number two, she takes it personally very often. She thinks it's about her. She thinks it's because she's not sexually satisfying in the relationship, or they're incompatible. So she takes it personally. He finds these young women more attractive than me, right? But it's also not just about that, because we've also identified in today's conversation that a lot of times it's not just sex. It's because the man is checking out of his life for some reason, right? He's looking just
Mhm.
for an outlet. Um, and just to get back to the point around hopefully the person you're in a relationship is doing their work or willing to do their work, because what's really critical for a partner on the other side of this addiction is that they have the perspective to recognize it's not just about them, that they can hopefully engage in the conversation without the shame and the judgment, so that he can tell his story in a safe place, right? So he can have a safe conditions to begin to share and open up around this, because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of hiding, there's a lot of secrecy, there's a lot of self-judgment. So if he doesn't feel safe, or he feels like she's going to lose it if she finds out what's really going on, or she's going to judge him, then he's not going to be willing to open up and to share and to be honest. So if a person has enough, I would say, consciousness, awareness, and they're doing their work and they're able to support and engage their partner and at least open up the conversation from a place of non-judgment, that would be the critical piece. Like, I did a whole podcast episode on how to make it safe for him to share. So that would be the one thing for a partner, is like, if you can create conditions within your relationship that you can open up the conversation, have this conversation, and hopefully help him to begin to share, so he knows that he doesn't have to deal with it by himself, and then you can begin to seek resolution together, that would be the optimal situation. But that requires a person who's doing their work, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, what a great answer, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Matt, where do people learn more either about what you're doing, or where can they find more supportive resources if this is something that's a challenge for them?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for the opportunity to share that. If you're on Facebook, I got a Facebook group, private, men's only, called Porn to Purpose. It would be a great place to begin to connect with men and have this conversation who are in community, and just begin, if nothing else, to be a fly on the wall and observe the conversations that are taking place. So that would be a great place. I've got a podcast, the Porn to Purpose podcast, where we're having conversations just like this. And we do have a website, porntopurpose.com, which talks about our program and the solutions that we're currently offering to men around this conversation.
Got it. Well, man, yeah. I'm very grateful for you sharing this message, for championing this cause, and for everything you're doing here, man. So keep up the great work. Thanks for being Life in Our Show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Great conversation today. Appreciate it.
Dude, what an impactful conversation, man. Like, I just feel like this is something that guys, like, no one wants to discuss it, right? Because it's like such a taboo subject. And, maybe this isn't an issue for a lot of our listeners, but maybe it is an issue. And I just think us kind of bringing to light some of the perspectives and angles about this. And again, like, I tried to make it as because listen, no one's judgment, blame, shame, none of these are good emotions, right? And so I hope that the listeners felt like we weren't kind of like, demonizing the person who views this or participates in it.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a really important topic to talk about. But the other aspect that I've gotten out of the episode, how important it is in our lives, in our families, in our relationships, to cultivate that no judgment kind of a perspective. We just came out of the, recently we were the retreats. And one of the things that I talk about in my own group that I reinforce every single day, that there is no judgment. There is no what he said, she said in this conversation, right? There is no gossip outside the doors that we can all agree on, because I think that is actually what resolves a lot of these things. I don't think that judgment or shame or guilt or whatever resolve things.
Right.
I mean, maybe temporarily, because what ends up happening, you feel bad and then you stop for a little while. But I think, if you look from the perspective of this, no judgment, and someone actually can open up and, start talking about it, I think that's what ultimately resolves it. So if you, in your life, whatever it might be, I think that's one of the reasons why Life on Air, works so well, because we reinforce that no judgments thing.
We love people where they are. And like you said, if someone feels judged or shameful, they're just going to hide it. They're just going to hide it, and now they're cutting off any external links to support and the things they need to help themselves. And
I think it actually gets worse.
Yeah, exactly. They just kind of spiral. And so whether it's alcohol or pornography or drugs or whatever it is, like I think just loving them where they are and helping people through those challenges is the way to go. And man, listen, I mean, pornography does, dude, I love the analogy that he gave at the end of like, it's a candy bar. It's a candy bar, right? You have this short-term satisfaction and a long-term negative effect that erodes, I believe, like a lot of things. Like, and it's just like, I'm really hard pressed to think of any real positive benefits to this, but it is alluring and it is appealing to a lot of people. And so, in some regards, I think, you got to kind of address what's under the hood as well. Like, why am I drawn to this? And how can I find other things to help me cope with this and get around people that can help me. And maybe it's even habits or, you're gonna, lock down your computer or, shut off a link to a website. I mean, there's all kinds of censorship stuff you can install on your computer or whatever it is like, but like, I don't, and I'll tell you what made this real for me, man, like, cause I used to always just think of it as this kind of like fake world. Like that was never real. Those aren't real people, but dude, when that girl that I dated got into it after we had broken up, like, that made it real, bro. That made it, these are real people. And, anybody, and by the way, I feel like such an old man saying this because like, I remember,
man, just accept it.
I am, but dude, do you remember in the movie The Hangover, where I think it's Stan, who is the guy with the glasses? Is that Stan? He was the dentist. And
Yeah,
they're
okay.
going to Vegas, and his wife says, like, she's like, "Don't go to the strip clubs. Those are someone's daughters." And like when I watched that movie years and years ago, I laughed at that. I'm like, "Oh, what a uptight like wife he has, whatever." And then I realized like she's right, like she's right. And I have three daughters, and like it's true. And like I just feel like, man, it's just something you want to avoid. You really want it. Like, it's just not a good thing.
Yeah, and then it takes a lot of courage. I will say, I'll just leave it with this, man. In order for you to deal with this, let's call it an addiction, right? Whether it's alcohol, whether it's pornography, whether it's drugs or whatever it might be, it takes a lot of courage to be able to go and step out and actually deal with it.
Yeah.
When he talked about community, talk about when you surround yourself with the people who are dealing with it, when they are on a journey of dealing with it, actually, right? It takes courage. So when you see other people, how they're winning, right? Gives you more hope, gives you this way of, okay, you know what? I can do it myself too. And then you start connecting with people a lot more. Because think about this, and we talked about the 6 human needs, right? One of the big ones for everybody else, everybody here in this world is to be connected. The solitude, the being cut off from the world is one of the worst things that you can do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it allows you to be connected more with people on a much deeper level. Connecting with your spouse, connected with your kids, connected with your parents, whoever it might be in your life. And all of a sudden, you start to get a lot of that satisfaction out of those connections. But so if you are listening to this particular episode and you are dealing with this, first and foremost, I just want you to recognize, like hopefully from this episode, is I'm not the only one, right? It's not just me. There's a lot more out there, right? So, and then find that community, find that help or whatever it might be. And then notice that takes a lot of courage. And when you keep stepping up, know how powerful of a person you are to be able to go and step out in the next step and the next step and the next step. Because when you look back of what you've achieved, holy cow. And if you did that, what can you actually do in life outside of that? Like when it comes to, let's say, growing a business and things like that. Think about it. This is one of the hardest things that you have to deal with. And when you beat that, you will freaking rock things out. One of my students, was dealing with alcohol. When he, got to a point where someone asked him, "Hey, you want a drink?" And his answer wasn't, "I'm recovering." His answer was, "I don't drink. That's not my identity." You should see, even before that, his business started to grow. He started making a lot more money. His relationship got better. His marriage got amazing, and all kinds of different things. So I just encourage you to go and step out, keep stepping out, and find that help, and keep asking the questions. And you might be surprised what comes for you.
Love it. Love it. Well, that's a great wrap, man. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, leave us a rating. Let us know what you think. Again, I know this is off the beaten path of what we typically cover, but it's really, it's you know, at the end of the day, life in here is all about having a great life. And anything that's going to encumber that or affect that is valid for us to discuss. And so we felt like this would be something that some people could benefit from. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.